"Sir, you can't be here." The words hung in the air like an unexpected slap. Darius Cole froze just inside the glass doors of Cole Dynamics, his company, his legacy. The lobby was a modern masterpiece. Marble floors that gleamed like mirrors, a vast chandelier dripping light across the sleek furniture, and the company's golden logo stretching across the far wall. Cole Dynamics, innovating the future. He had spent 15 years turning that dream into a reality. But at that moment, the same space he had built felt cold and unfamiliar. The man speaking was a security guard, tall and muscular, with an earpiece and the no-nonsense tone of someone used to being obeyed. He looked Darius up and down, taking in his hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. A far cry from the expensive suits and polished image the media associated with the billionaire tech genius. "I said you can't be here," the guard repeated. "This is a restricted area. Authorized employees only." Darius blinked, more in disbelief than anger. "Restricted area?" He gave a small, polite smile. "This is the main lobby." "I think I'm in the right place." The guard frowned. "We've had some incidents recently. Random people walking in, trying to talk to execs or apply for jobs directly. You'll have to leave." Darius tilted his head slightly, studying the man. His own security staff, people he paid generously, didn't recognize him. It shouldn't have been surprising. He wasn't one to flaunt his face around the building much anymore. Since Cole Dynamics had gone public, layers of management and protocol had separated him from the everyday operation. Still, he thought there'd be some sense of awareness, some respect for the man who made all of this possible. He chuckled softly. "I'm not here to apply for a job. Actually, Sir," the guard interrupted, now stepping closer. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You can make an appointment online like everyone else." A few employees passing through the lobby slowed down to watch. Some whispered. Others avoided eye contact, the way people do when they sense tension but don't want to get involved. Darius felt their stares, the quiet judgment in their glances. He'd seen it before, long before he was a billionaire. The look that said, "You don't belong here." His lips tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "You must be new." "My name doesn't matter who you are," the guard cut in. "I've got procedures to follow." At the front desk, a young woman looked up from her computer screen. Her name tag read Brenda, reception supervisor. She frowned as she saw the exchange. "Is there a problem?" she asked, approaching with a clipboard in hand. "This man doesn't have an appointment," the guard said. "No ID badge. No guest pass." Brenda looked Darius up and down, her expression cooling quickly. "Sir, do you have any documentation? A visitor's pass? Someone you're meeting?" Darius took a slow breath, suppressing a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Actually," he said, "I think I do have authorization." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, intending to call his assistant. But then, something inside him hesitated. He'd built Cole Dynamics to be a company of fairness and innovation, one that treated every person with respect, regardless of what they looked like. He wanted to believe his employees reflected that vision. But here he was, being dismissed and threatened with removal for not fitting the billionaire image. He put the phone back in his pocket. "Let's pretend for a moment," he said slowly, "that I'm just a regular man walking in off the street. Would you treat me differently if I were wearing a suit?" Brenda stiffened. "Sir, this isn't about your clothes." "We just have procedures," he smiled thinly. "Right, procedures." "Sir, if you don't cooperate, I'll have to call the police," she said, her voice lower now, laced with irritation. There was silence. Darius felt the chill in the air, that unspoken line between power and perception. He could easily end this charade. He could show his ID, call the board, or even pull up the company's ownership page and watch their faces turn white. But something deeper stirred inside him, a strange mix of disappointment and curiosity. He wanted to see just how blind his company had become. So he stepped back, raised his hand slightly and said, "Go ahead. Call them." The guard's jaw tightened. He clearly didn't expect that response. Brenda sighed and muttered something under her breath, dialing the building's internal line. A couple of interns near the elevator snickered, one whispering, "Guess he thought he could just walk in here." Darius caught the words but said nothing. He turned and looked around the lobby, at the towering LED screens displaying company milestones, the posters celebrating equality and innovation, the words empower, create, lead, printed proudly across the walls. He almost laughed. Within minutes, 2 more guards arrived. They flanked him politely but firmly, guiding him toward the exit. One of them, younger and clearly uncomfortable, murmured, "Sorry, sir, just doing our job." Darius nodded, his voice calm. "You're doing it well. Don't apologize." As he stepped outside, the California sun hit his face. He stood on the marble steps, gazing up at the building that bore his name, C.O. Lee, in bold letters stretching across the glass facade. It shimmered in the light, powerful, untouchable. But inside, it had forgotten the very man who'd built it. He thought of the long nights he'd spent coding in a cramped apartment, of the countless investors who'd told him no, of the nights he'd gone hungry just to keep the servers running. Every struggle, every sacrifice, when it all led to this empire. Yet the people running it didn't see him. They only saw the hoodie, the brown skin, the lack of a badge. He laughed quietly under his breath, shaking his head. A woman walking by gave him a strange look, clutching her purse tighter as she passed. He didn't care. His mind was already racing. Maybe this was exactly what he needed, to see the truth. To understand what his company had become without the filters of meetings, reports, and polished presentations. He had stepped away for too long, trusting others to uphold his values. And now he was standing outside his own dream, treated like a trespasser. He looked one last time at the security guard still watching him from inside the glass doors. Their eyes met. Darius gave a small nod, a knowing smile curling on his lips. "Don't worry," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I'll be back." As he walked toward his car, he pulled out his phone, not to call his assistant, but to open the employee directory. He scrolled through names, faces, titles. Then he closed it and set the phone down. He already knew what he had to do. That night, while the world slept, Darius sat in his study, the same one he'd worked in during the company's earliest days. Old photos lined the shelves. A younger version of him with his first team, the company's launch event, his mother cutting the ribbon on their first office. He leaned back, eyes fixed on the glowing city skyline. For the first time in years, he felt something powerful awaken inside him. Not anger, not humiliation, but purpose. Tomorrow, he wouldn't return as the billionaire CEO. He'd return as someone invisible, someone the system didn't see. Because sometimes, to understand your kingdom, you have to walk among the people who've forgotten who you are. And Darius Cole, the man who once built an empire from nothing, was ready to start from the bottom again. The story of what happened in the lobby spread through Cole Dynamics like wildfire. By noon, whispers traveled from the receptionist's desk to the 12th floor cafeteria about a random guy who tried to sneak into the building, refused to leave, and was almost arrested. Everyone had an opinion. Some laughed it off. Others speculated. No one knew the truth. No one realized the man they had humiliated was the very founder whose name shone above their paychecks. Darius sat quietly in the back seat of his car, parked across the street from his company. The massive glass tower reflected the morning sunlight, its structure elegant, clean, and soulless. He watched employees walk in, heads buried in phones, coffee cups in hand, ignoring the world around them. It looked efficient, successful, and yet hollow. He had once dreamed of creating a place where talent thrived over appearances, where innovation came from every corner, no matter what color, class, or degree. Now it felt like the very system he had fought against had swallowed his creation whole. He leaned back, closing his eyes. "When did this place forget me?" he muttered under his breath. The driver, seated silently up front, glanced at him through the mirror. "Sir, are we heading to the mansion?" Darius shook his head. "No, drop me at the maintenance entrance," the driver frowned. "Sir?" "Just do it," Darius said, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "I need to meet some old friends." A few hours later, the billionaire who graced Forbes covers and tech panels was gone. In his place stood an older-looking man in faded overalls, a baseball cap pulled low and a maintenance badge clipped to his chest, one that simply read, Cole D. The disguise wasn't elaborate. It didn't need to be. No one at Cole Dynamics ever looked twice at janitors. He walked through the employee entrance unnoticed, pushing a cleaning cart he'd borrowed from one of the overnight staff who still remembered the old days. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the soft hum of machines. The floors gleamed and the silence of early morning echoed through the hallways. Darius moved slowly, deliberately. He stopped near the elevator bank, pretending to check the mop bucket while watching employees arrive. Most avoided eye contact. A few murmured greetings, but not one person asked his name. He smiled bitterly. It was incredible how invisible you could become once you no longer looked like money. He made his way to the cafeteria around lunchtime. It was buzzing with energy, laughter, conversations, the clinking of trays. He stood in the corner, wiping a counter that didn't need cleaning, listening. A group of mid-level managers sat nearby discussing yesterday's intruder. One of the guards said the guy claimed he owned the place. One of them snorted. "Can you imagine? Some random man walking in here thinking he's a big shot. Probably one of those entitled types," another laughed. "Or maybe a con artist. You never know these days." Darius turned slightly away, biting down on a quiet laugh. The irony was delicious and painful all at once. Then his gaze fell on a young woman sitting alone at the far end of the room. She was trying to balance 2 trays filled with sandwiches and water bottles. Across from her sat 2 male employees whispering and laughing under their breath. When she passed their table, one of them muttered, "Careful, sweetheart. Don't drop the boss's lunch," the other snickered. "Oh wait, she probably isn't allowed near the boss. Not with that accent." The woman's shoulders stiffened, but she said nothing. Her dark curls framed a determined face, one that looked far too young to already wear exhaustion like armor. She walked away quickly, but Darius noticed her hands trembling slightly. Something in him stirred. He walked over, grabbed a cloth from his cart and said, "Here, let me help you with that." She looked startled. "Oh no, it's fine, I can manage." He smiled gently. "Please. I've had worse bosses than gravity." That made her laugh, a small but genuine sound. She allowed him to take 1 tray and followed him to a nearby table. "You work here?" he asked casually as they set the food down. She nodded. "Kind of, I'm just an intern. Been here for 3 months, it's intense." "I can imagine," Darius said, leaning on his mop. "So you like it?" She hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I love the work, but sometimes it feels like people here already decided who matters and who doesn't. If you don't dress a certain way, or talk a certain way, they look at you like you don't belong." Darius nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "That's not how it's supposed to be." She smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who cares." "Maybe I do," he said. "What's your name?" "Maya," she said, offering her hand. "And you're?" "D," he replied with a playful smirk. "Just D," she shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, D." They sat in silence for a moment. Maya took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "You know, I have an idea, something that could really help this company. But I don't think anyone would listen to me." "Why not?" Darius asked. "Because I'm just an intern," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I tried mentioning it once in a meeting, but one of the senior engineers laughed and said, 'Leave the big ideas to the big kids.'" Darius's chest tightened. He saw himself in her, young, overlooked, and burning with ideas that no one cared to hear. "What's your idea?" he asked softly. She hesitated. "It's about using our AI software to help underfunded schools track and improve student learning outcomes. It's not glamorous, not profitable at first, but it could make a difference." "That sounds brilliant," he said genuinely. She shrugged. "Yeah, but no one's asking for brilliance. They just want the next big profit pitch." Before Darius could respond, 2 executives entered the cafeteria, men in tailored suits laughing loudly. He recognized them instantly. Brian Hughes, Vice President of Operations, and Simon Laird, Head of Finance. Both men he'd personally hired years ago. "Gentlemen who only see numbers," Darius murmured under his breath. They walked past him without a glance. He heard Simon say, "That diversity budget cut went through this morning. Finally. Waste of resources, honestly. Hiring quotas don't build software." Brian laughed. "Exactly. We need talent, not charity." Darius froze mid-motion. His knuckles tightened around the mop handle. The same diversity programs they were mocking were the reason he had ever gotten a chance in the first place. His stomach churned with disgust. He turned to Maya. "You heard that?" She nodded sadly. "I hear things like that all the time. It's just how it is." He looked at her, really looked, and something in him solidified. "No," he said quietly. "It's not how it's supposed to be." That afternoon, Darius continued his silent observation. He walked the halls, blending into the background. He overheard project managers shouting at junior staff, dismissing ideas with arrogance. He watched employees rush past cleaning staff without so much as a nod. He even saw an executive scold a delivery driver for being unprofessional because of his accent. Every floor, every corner, every careless comment chipped away at the illusion he'd been living in. Cole Dynamics wasn't the company he had built. It was efficient, profitable, and heartless. By the time the clock hit 5 p.m., Darius knew what he had to do. He went to the maintenance room, changed into a clean shirt he'd stashed earlier, and made his way to the top floor. The executive suite was a world apart. Soft music, glass walls, panoramic views of the city. People greeted the CEO's assistant with polished smiles, careful words. Darius could feel the falseness in every exchange. He walked straight into the boardroom. The large mahogany table gleamed under the lights. A handful of executives were gathered, reviewing slides for an upcoming investor meeting. Brian Hughes looked up first, frowning. "Excuse me, who are you? Janitorial meetings are downstairs." Darius dropped his mop, straightened his back, and calmly reached into his pocket. He placed a sleek black access card on the table, one that shimmered with the company logo in gold trim. Brian frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Then Darius pulled out another and another. 3 executive-level keycards, each engraved with his initials. DC, gentlemen, he said, his voice calm but cold. It means I can go anywhere in this building because I built it. The room fell silent. Confusion rippled across their faces. Then realization struck. Simon's jaw dropped. Wait, Cole? As in, yes, Darius interrupted. As in Darius Cole, the man whose name is on your paycheck. The man you told security to escort out yesterday. A heavy silence consumed the room. Brian's face turned pale. The presentation on the screen froze mid-slide, the words Q3 growth hanging in the air. Darius looked at them. These men who once swore loyalty, now exposed by their own arrogance. I spent today walking through my own company as someone invisible. I saw how you treat people, how you speak to them. I saw how easily you dismissed a bright intern because she didn't fit your mold. I saw how you laughed about cutting programs that give people a chance. No one dared to speak. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. Cole Dynamics was built on respect, opportunity, and vision. I didn't claw my way out of poverty to build a corporation that treats people like dirt. Brian stammered. Mr. Cole, this must be some misunderstanding. Darius raised a hand, silencing him. The only misunderstanding is how far you've all strayed from what this company stands for. He turned toward the door. Security, bring in Maya. A moment later, the young intern entered hesitantly, her eyes wide with shock. She looked from Darius to the executives, clearly confused. The silence that filled the boardroom was the kind that burned, a silence soaked in disbelief, guilt, and fear. Every executive sat frozen, their eyes darting from one another, unsure if this was some elaborate prank or the beginning of their reckoning. But when Darius Cole placed his hands on the edge of the table, his calm voice slicing through the still air, they knew it was real. I built this company to stand for something, he said quietly, his voice controlled but heavy with emotion. But somewhere along the way it became just another machine, one that chews up people and spits out profit. Simon shifted nervously in his chair. Mr. Cole, if there's been a misunderstanding, there's no misunderstanding, Darius interrupted sharply. I walked in yesterday, no badge, no title, just me. And what did your people do? They threw me out like a trespasser. He looked at each of them in turn, men and women who had once believed in his vision, now blinded by their own positions. You all talk about inclusion, innovation, equality, words printed on banners and slides. But they don't mean anything here anymore. You've turned my dream into a slogan. No one spoke. The only sound came from the city humming faintly beyond the glass windows. Finally, Darius looked toward Maya, who sat near the doorway, unsure if she should even be in the room. Come closer, he said gently. She hesitated, then stepped forward. These people, he continued, represent the leadership of Cole Dynamics, the same leadership that cut diversity programs and ignored young voices like yours. Yet you, an intern, came up with one of the most powerful ideas I've heard in years. Maya blushed, shaking her head. I just thought it could help people. That's exactly the point, Darius said. You thought about people, not profit. You thought about purpose, D. He turned back to the board. Do you remember when that mattered to us? When every project we launched wasn't just about money, but about making life better for someone? Brian, the vice president, cleared his throat. Sir, with respect, the company has evolved. We have shareholders now, targets. Darius slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing like thunder. Don't you dare talk to me about shareholders, he snapped. I am the largest shareholder. And I'm telling you right now, evolution doesn't mean losing your soul. He stood upright again, his voice steady. This company was born in a one-bedroom apartment. No investors, no fancy offices, no media buzz. Just an old laptop, a dream, and faith that a kid like me, a poor black man from the South Side, could build something the world would remember. I didn't do it for power. I did it so that people who looked like me, who grew up like me, could see that it was possible. Every word struck deep. No one dared move. Darius looked down the table at each face, on the nervous glances, the trembling fingers, the executives who suddenly looked very small in their expensive suits. Then quietly he said, "But you forgot that. You forgot me." The words lingered in the air like smoke. He walked to the window, looking out at the skyline. The city lights flickered like tiny stars. His reflection looked back at him. A man older, wiser, but still carrying the same fire that started everything. Then he turned back and spoke with finality. Effective immediately, the leadership structure is changing. Anyone who thinks this company exists to feed their ego or bank account can consider this your last meeting. Gasps filled the room. Brian stammered. Sir, you can't just— Oh, I can, Darius said calmly. I own 51% of this company, and I've seen enough. He motioned toward his assistant, who had just entered, holding a stack of folders. These are your termination papers. HR will escort you out. Don't worry, your severance packages are generous. More generous than your attitudes deserve. Brian's mouth opened to argue, but one look from Darius shut him down. Then Darius turned to Maya again, his voice softening. You, on the other hand, are the future of coal dynamics. Maya's eyes widened. Me? Yes, you, he said. You had an idea. You had courage. You had compassion. That's what this company was built on. You're going to lead that education project. Full funding, full support, and direct access to me. No middlemen. Tears glimmered in her eyes. Mr. Cole, I don't even know what to say. He smiled. Just promise me you'll never stop caring. Promise me you'll never let this place forget its heart again. She nodded, unable to speak. Darius turned to the remaining executives, the ones who had watched everything in stunned silence. Those of you who stay will rebuild this company the right way. You'll listen, you'll respect. You'll remember that innovation isn't just about code and profit margins. It's about people. He paused, his gaze sweeping across them. Because if I ever walk through these doors again and see what I saw yesterday, I won't fire you. His eyes darkened. I'll shut this place down myself. The room remained silent. But this time it wasn't fear alone that filled the air. It was realization. Within weeks, the story hit every news outlet in the country. Billionaire founder goes undercover as janitor, exposes his own company. The headlines were everywhere. Talk shows discussed it. Social media exploded with clips from employees praising the changes he'd made. For once, the world wasn't just talking about Darius Cole's wealth. They were talking about his message. Coal Dynamics began transforming from the inside out. Maya's education initiative launched within a month. Software connecting schools in poor neighborhoods with real-time learning tools. The press called it the project that put soul back into Silicon Valley. Darius didn't care about the headlines. He cared about walking into classrooms where kids were using his technology, seeing their faces light up with possibilities. Inside the company, policies changed. Employee mentorship programs returned. Entry-level voices were heard in board meetings. For the first time in years, the building buzzed with genuine energy, the kind that couldn't be bought or faked. Darius made it a ritual to walk the halls once a week, unannounced. Sometimes in his tailored suit, sometimes in plain clothes. This time, every employee, from janitors to developers, greeted him with respect, not fear. One late evening, he walked through the same lobby where it all began. The lights were softer now, the air warmer. At the front desk stood the same security guard who had stopped him that first day. The man straightened immediately. "Good evening, Mr. Cole," he said respectfully. "Welcome home." Darius stopped, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good evening, Charles." The guard looked down, embarrassed. "Sir, about that day," Darius raised a hand. "No need, you were doing your job." And in a way, you did me a favor. That day reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Charles smiled, visibly relieved. Thank you, sir. Darius walked across the lobby, his shoes echoing softly against the marble floor. The golden logo above the reception desk caught his eye. Cold Dynamics, empowering the future. For years, those words had been marketing fluff, but now they meant something again. As he entered the elevator, he pressed the button for the top floor. The mirrored walls reflected his calm, steady gaze. No arrogance, no anger, just peace. He had rebuilt his company not through power, but through humility. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped into the executive floor, now bustling with quiet collaboration. Maya was standing near the window reviewing plans with a small team. She turned when she saw him and smiled. Mr. Cole, she said, the first pilot schools are online. Kids are already using the platform. He grinned. That's faster than I expected. They're calling it Project Rise, she said proudly. Because it's not just about technology. It's about helping people rise. He nodded slowly, pride glinting in his eyes. That's beautiful. Keep pushing it forward. Don't let anyone water it down. I won't, she said. As she turned back to her team, Darius looked around the floor. The laughter, the energy, the sense of purpose. This was the company he had dreamed of. Not the one run by titles and profits, but one driven by people who believed in something greater. He walked to the window, watching the city lights shimmer below. The same skyline that once felt like an impossible dream now stretched endlessly, glowing with promise. He thought about his mother, who had once told him, "Never build something so big that you forget to look people in the eye." For a while he had forgotten, but not anymore. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "This is how it should have always been." And as he stood there, looking out over the world he'd helped shape, no longer just a billionaire, but a man who had rediscovered his purpose, Darius Cole smiled. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't just the richest man in the room, he was the proudest.